Group rape, gang rape, when a large amount of people, or even just a few, assault one, two, it's generally, they tend to keep their victims limited. My experience was when I was, I think, 11, 12. The neighborhood boys, of course we lived in a bad neighborhood, right? We were poor. The neighborhood boys decided that I was just a toy that they could just hand around and pass around one to each other. Those memories stayed locked up for a long time. I was way too young, way too small. So they didn't pop up until I was old enough to maybe deal with those issues. And that had some pretty good long-term effects as far as not just my sex life or my belief systems or even though I didn't remember the events, I remembered that feeling of being used, being tossed around. It wasn't per se personal. They just felt like they could do whatever they wanted to me. I was too small to defend myself. But I've heard a lot of other stories of gang rapes as well. In my case, it was repetitive. Whenever they wanted something to play with, they would grab me and coax me and lure me to wherever so that they could just hand me around to whoever was there. But I've heard other cases. It's definitely not about if you weren't alone. I know other places where people were with escort or somebody else, and the other person was beaten as well, and in some cases tied, gagged, captured. There's usually a lot of physical violence involved. People are beaten into submission. So that is a societal toxic masculinity. Again, the perpetrators are men. But they feel ganging up on somebody and being a man has to do with hurting other people. Or worse, they feel like they have the right and the other person doesn't have any feelings. So when you're dealing with gang rape or group rapes, and they're a lot more common than people would like to admit, you're dealing with that these people thought that it was okay and that you're an object and that people can just do whatever they want to you. So there's some serious issues there to overcome in that feeling of being used, discarded, because that's usually what happens, is they'll beat you, they'll tie you up, they'll drug you, they'll take advantage of you, and then you're discarded like a piece of trash. And it's your fault, and now you're used and you're damaged. So there's some serious issues there, and the best way to overcome that is to start talking about that and to start working through those feelings and those emotions. I know in my case, it wasn't until I was older before I could start dealing with that, because the denialism is big too. And if you have police involvement, that's going to throw things up in your face over and over again. And you're going to have a lot of people throwing blame on this and throwing blame on that. But that's toxic masculinity. That is where a group of men believe that it is okay for them to just use and abuse somebody else. So we need to changing that on a societal scope. And on a global scope, it's very, very, very common in other countries that you can just grab a woman and do whatever. It's practiced a lot in warfare, where the soldiers will gang up, and in some cases they beat and subdue the husband or the brothers or whatever protections were there, make them watch, and they'll abuse even small children because it's psychological warfare. So they know that there's damage there. But the fact that anybody participates in such a thing, that means that that's an internal issue that they need to learn that that's wrong. I don't care if you're in war. It's not okay. And they should be prosecuted on a whole new level, especially if they're using it simply to dominate another race, another species. I've heard of gang rapes on transgenders, which I find very offensive in multiple ways. But they're doing it to prove that they shouldn't be a transgender, and what they've really shown is that they're attracted to transgenders as far as I'm concerned. So that that's not on you, and it's not your fault. And there's probably nothing you could have done about it. Again, soldiers will use weapons to assault small children and women in front of their husbands, in front of their brothers, in front of their escorts, gangs, and you can have somebody with you. You can have protection. You can have this and that, and they assault, and they need to be prosecuted for that assault. So, kind of a heavy subject, and I'm going to close this and open the page for talking about it.